and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my roll chop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed Vic hoes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bought your great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to UCY Radio. This is Voice of Rebellion Radio with your one and only host, Chris J. Another Sunday night edition of this show. It is a little after 9 p.m. Eastern Time here on the East Coast, and then Pacific Time out there on the West Coast, 6 o'clock. And everybody, I hope we settle down this evening. And we're talking about financial terrorists. These aren't the fictional terrorists that, were supposedly responsible for the Twin Towers falling. However, that was really an inside job. That's a whole other show. And to going into I could literally talk an entire show about how that was an inside job. But this is a financial terrorist. These are the people that they don't make countries, they break countries. They could make countries that they're trying to own in, like the United States, and turn into a military industrial complex superpower with a military that can, just destroy country after country. And they can just break countries like what they did in Zimbabwe in the last 30 years, what they have done in the past to Spain, Portugal, Greece. And Greece is now trying to dig their way out of the hole, and that's what we're seeing right now. But it's very hard because they were put so deep in that hole by the financial terrorists that are the IMF in the last, I would say, 10 years. And then the current government is trying to not pay back the international bankers because of the usury that's been done to levy such debts on Greece. But the IMF is doing all in their power to keep putting a vice grip onto Athens and turn it into another country that they ruined. International bankers, when they step in and interfere into many countries, they, pretty much in every country eventually, but sometimes very quickly. Like, for example, when the international bankers stepped in the Somali situation, it was already kind of a bad situation because of just where it's located. It was a very poor country in the 70s and 80s. And then around 91, the Somali socialist government collapsed. The international bankers at the United States go intervene. And then ever since that, Somalia has been one of the worst countries on the planet to live just because of how poor it is. And it's like I wouldn't say that's the lack of government that's the problem. The problem is just the constant fighting. And yes, there's no unity in that country. Just it's a war and factions at each other. And that's they literally, the international bankers, when they stepped into Somalia, destroyed that country practically. Somalia is falling worse and worse apart. It seems like every day. And Zimbabwe is kind of a similar circumstance. But they were trying to stop Zimbabwe from the start of that country creation, because remember, Rhodesia was the country was for a long time when it was British controlled, and really it was a complete stealing of land taken away. They stripped the Zimbabweans' culture. It was Zimbabwe in the past. That's why it's called Zimbabwe now. But for a while, they named it after ruthless murderer. And yes, this is the same guy that Rhodes Scholarship is named after. You know, the one that Bill Clinton received. And the presidents, supposedly if you're super smart, you get this scholarship. The only thing is that scholarship is named after a guy that killed 10 million Africans, Cecil Rhodes, with his imperial conquest, which, remember, Britain had, at the turn of the century, a ton of the African continent under its control, which I guess would make sense that U.S. president, considering that they do the same imperial conquest, and practically the United States government has taken over the spot that the British government had as the Rothschilds' main military arm, in the last 100 years. British used to be that role. Now it's the United States. So I guess it just makes all sense that Bill Clinton, who was the president at one time, gets the Rhodes Scholarship. And going back to what I was talking about, so Rhodesia, what the country was till around 1980. Then Robert Mugabe takes over the country. Zimbabwe becomes the country's name, and he restores slowly the Africans' land back to the Africans. He restores the African identity. And he has a revolutionary socialist government that at first it was not very revolutionary at all. I wouldn't say socialist either. It was a imperial pawn at first, really, Mugabe. It's true. In the first couple of years, he received an award for Britain, but he slowly moved away in the first 5 to 10 years of his presidency. And now it's completely different. I don't know if Mugabe just came to the sense and realized that Zimbabwe would become Rhodesia again, or will continue to be in a colonial British outpost, even if it technically was an independent country. It wouldn't be independent de jure, but in reality, de facto, it wouldn't be. It would be de facto colony. What's many countries? They're de facto free, but they're really part of a sphere of influence from the United States, or maybe one of the countries that the bankers have a lot of control in: Europe, Britain, France. France is also another country that inflicted a lot of terror on Africa. And it's like, when I talk about it, it's like financial terrorists and the debt that they levy on some of these African countries. That's the real reason why Africa, part of the reason, it's a robbery that they did of Africa, is they're not poor, they got robbed. Africa is a very rich country with many natural resources, with almost the entire continent coated with natural resources. And yes, Libya was a very major reason why Gaddafi was taken out. Not also because of the fact that because he was trying to print a gold currency for all of Africa to use that'd be debt free. It would be free. The Rothschilds would not have any part of Africa anymore. So, he was an anti-Rothschild leader that was actually about to unify all of Africa, the world's largest continent. Let me put that out there. That's another thing that we've been deceived about. I know it's not really a show about Africa, but Africa is the world's largest continent. Even if the map doesn't really show it that way, it's because back in the day, the Mercator map was shown to put the countries that are wealthier as a lot larger than they really were. Europe, is shown to be, I think, a bit bigger than it really is on the Mercator map. And the United States is shown bigger than it really is. I mean, let's put this in perspective. People would think, oh, the United States is, there's no. What? Let me ask you guys, what would you think Italy would fit into in the United States? What part of the country would take? Maybe just a few northeastern states? Probably some people would argue that, or would try to say that it's only made one large state. But the thing is that it's not even just as big as the Northeast. It's as big as the entire eastern seaboard put together. And this is what we think of as a pretty small country over here in the United States, a regular person. Africa is so big that the United States could fit in just practically the northwest corner of the country. Is by far the world's largest continent. And if you saw the true size on a real map of what Africa is, it's astonishing. It's astonishing how we were lied to about, how big this continent is, and it's probably made to realize that we don't think about the true power they could have, like what Gaddafi was trying to do, unify it. unify them against the financial terrorists that have forever been trying to strike at Africa very hard. I think that really just the third world in general, South America as well, has felt a lot of Africa's pain. Feel the, it's you can feel the just as the third world is also in the Middle East, what they that it's said a lot of times, it's like in this last 20th century, people, they stopped being pitiful countries. They stopped, having their people feel the pity of having to be, peasants in a country full of rich and natural resources. And so it was no longer these pitiful countries. They finally got leaders that, kicked out the bankers and actually used their own resources and made these countries no longer the very poor third world countries. And then, South America in the last 25 years, not even the last 25 years, more like the last 20, we had the Bolivian Revolution, Middle East, in the last 40 or so, we had the Baas Revolution, not the one in Iraq, but that was a United States construct. It was a United States constructed regime, Saddam, from the beginning. I'm talking about Assad. I'm talking about also, we've had what's recently was the Houthis in the Middle East, and then Africa we had Gaddafi, we had Mugabe, and we had a few others that were in the African continent that were trying to actually liberate their countries. And you see them attacked, put them as horrible dictators, pointed these people out about how the supposed human rights violations in these countries, while they completely ignore about stuff like what Pinochet did under United States control, or what Stroessner, that was a DC puppet, did in Paraguay, or what many of these fascist dictators of the United States supported. I mean, there's just a ton of them. Names are kind of coming to mind now. I mean, there's Marcos. There's also Salazar, of course, and just many that the United States propped up. This is one of the things that okay, everybody. Just got a call from my co-host Al Shores. I know you're wondering when he was going to come into the show, and I'm going to pause the show for a sec here, and then I'm going to come back with my co-host, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, it's gonna pause again in a sec here while Al calls UCY Radio, but let me jog my mind back what I was talking about. But it's financial terrorists. It's a designation that actually I haven't even got to who designated financial terrorists as financial terrorists. These international bankers. Maduro came up with this brilliant term for them, just in a speech I think just about a week ago, where he was because his country's they've been trying to attack his country. They attack economies, and they also have and they control militaries to attack physically, and they attack economies like what they did with Mugabe in the past. They they devalued his currency literally till it was no longer an effective. I mean, they tried to do almost, they almost tried to make it like a Somalia where there was literally dismember, I guess is a good word, the currency from the country. As now Zimbabwean currency does, they don't even have a currency. They're relying on Chinese currency now, because they had such horrible inflation. And people often blame Robert Mugabe's supposedly terrible economics, because that might have came into factor because he did not have I don't think he had any formal education in economics. Okay, we're back on there, but let me finish my point. I'll introduce Al back into the show. But I want to finish my point real quick. Is that with financial terrorists, they do stuff. They do stuff like Zimbabwe, and I was going to say that in Zimbabwe, it was not Mugabe who caused the terrible inflation in the country. It was international pressure, sanctions, and economic pressure. Many terrible things that they did to this economy, and they literally put Zimbabwe against the world, a little small country, and they isolated it because they had turned against Britain, who Britain at first actually believed. I mean, given Mugabe an award, one of the top awards that Britain can give, it says a lot. It's like one of those Queen's Merit, I don't know. But anyways, everybody, Al Shores is now in the studio. And yeah, I was just talking about like examples. I was thinking that they did this in Africa a few times, including with Zimbabwe, where they literally tried to.
Was the intro song able to play?
Yeah, Immortal Technique was on the intro today, and that was Rich Man's World.
Awesome. What song was it?
Rich Man's World, I said.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. You can hear me all right, right?
No, you need to talk louder or something because it's really quiet.
I'm probably going to have to turn the AC off and turn the fan on. Hold on a sec.
But, yeah, we have Immortal Techniques songs now. We have Rich Man's World, and you'll see the outro. We also have an Immortal Technique song for the outro. Payday Monsanto, I guess, is on the way out for now. Immortal Technique. No, since we got the rights to the music.
Well, you know what's bizarre, Chris, and I think it's appropriate that I mentioned this early on, because this guy might call in again. The first thing he did was attack Immortal Technique. Now, that makes me feel a little paranoid if you consider that I just met the guy, right? I mean, yeah, he could be some random creep, but after thinking about it, this guy called on the air, and the first thing he does is accuse us of supporting killing of Ukrainian protesters because we support Immortal Technique. Like, we didn't even talk about Immortal Technique. Like, how does he know that? How does he know that I just met him in Philly? Like, the guy's obviously insane because he thinks just because somebody came on Russia Today TV, which has thousands of guests, and, they represent Russians, which are millions of people, that every guest on RT then somehow supports killing of protesters. The guy had his geography messed up, and now we know he has links to InfoWars. We did our counter video, with the movie, what was it called? The Hitler movie in the bunker.
I think that what's the movie name? It's like
it means
Downfall.
Defeated. Downfall, yeah, Downfall. And we did the subtitles, the parody, to counter that call. And I think we handled him with self-control, considering the first thing he said was an accusation.
Let's
I think we made
let's not give this guy too much credit.
I know. I don't want to talk about him too much. I'm just putting it out
troll that he was.
Yeah.
I mean, if this guy calls in again, we're not gonna hold back this time. But I don't think he will, because we made him look like a clown. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he's too crazy to realize that he is a clown. But here's the thing: is that right now you're letting him be. You're letting him be the troll of our network. But what we got to do is that we got to fire the troll of the network, and we got to tell this troll, "You're fired," as Donald Trump will say.
Yeah, we always welcome debate, but if the first thing you're going to say on the program is an attack, I mean, you're already on our shit list pretty much. But we're not just going to stand aside. We're not soft, passive socialists like Bernie Sanders, who's not even a real socialist, who acts basically as a defense attorney to Hillary Clinton. Real socialists, we're willing to fight back. We're not going to put up with that shit,
Oh yeah, we're not going to put up with. It's too far. It's too far to It's like Immortal Technique is almost like a person. I mean, he's a personal friend of ours, and he's almost like a personal friend of mine, even though I haven't met him yet. He's kind of in our circle almost a little bit. So you attack him first, and it's really weird that that this guy knows that he must, because why would you be attacking him? We didn't even mention Immortal Technique, did we? Towards the end of the show, maybe we did.
No,
but,
we did after he did, but he was either looking for my Facebook profile and maybe saw my profile picture with him or something. But he was looking us up. He had us in the crosshairs, and then he decided to call in to attack. And he probably expected us not to do anything. I mean, if you look up, what pisses me off is not so much the call because it made him look like an idiot. What pisses me off, people are trying to look for our show on YouTube now. The first video that comes up with all these hits is his video. But in his video, if you actually listen to it, he sounds like an idiot because he actually shows the recording when he called in. And we made him look ridiculous, like a clown, as you said. And by the way, we had technical difficulties earlier. That's why the show's starting a little bit late. But our main topic is the financial terrorists. I don't want to get too off on what happened with this guy, but we're just putting that out there in case you heard the last show or what happened.
Well, I'm gonna say that this guy also just, one thing I want to point out is he says that Assange and Snowden, which I guess is, I don't know who exactly says that, but people, he says that Assange and Snowden are phonies because they were on Time Magazine. However, they were on Time Magazine not because Time Magazine was supporting the whistleblowers, it's because Time Magazine was criticizing them and calling them traitors and stuff like that. Whereas in Assange's case, calling him a dangerous man. So it's a really bogus argument. And, Immortal Technique going on RT doesn't even mean that he supports Putin, but what's wrong with
talk about Ukraine, I don't think, when he goes on RT. Like, seriously?
And so all his arguments were dumb. But, let's go back to the financial terrorists. These are the IMF, this is the Rothschilds, this is the top bankers that, destroy countries with your financial power, and then they can literally send militaries to attack them physically. And with Greece, that's what they did. They levied so much debt on Greece, that now they're trying to dig their way out of it. They're trying to default and not have to pay because it was levied on them in unfair ways. However, you have the EU is looks like trying to put a tighter vice grip on Greece, and they're trying to pressure the new prime minister they're trying to make him at least pay some of it or come to some kind of compromise, and he's kind of stuck to his guns. But they've done many tactics, and the thing is that inside of Greece at this point, it's like what I said, they will factionalize their country, turn everybody against each other, and destroy all unity in the country as well. But right now it's starting to split apart. I mean, there's this far left, like the Stalinist, faction in the country is now heavily against, because he is Trotskyist, Alexis Tsipras, but they were somewhat supportive of him, and they're kind of now showing their Stalinist colors by attacking him.
He's also a Guevarist because remember he named his son Ernesto after Ernesto Che Guevara. But of course Ernesto was also influenced by Trotskyism. But certainly there are, like the Communist Party of Greece, which are dominated by Stalinists. They're trying to sabotage now the negotiation that Tsipras is doing. And my view on the negotiations, I have mixed feelings. Number one, I'm a realist. I know that if he just all out without any support internationally says we're going to leave the Eurozone and then stop negotiations, that he could be assassinated or the country could have foreign invasion or civil war like what happened in Russia when they canceled the debt. So, I have to be realistic on that. But at the same time, I think that eventually Tsipras, if the negotiations aren't working, he needs to reach out to his comrades in other European countries. And like I said in the last show, come out for a united socialist state of Europe, which has been an idea of comrades in Europe for some time, especially to counter the more capitalist EU, which is under the dominion of the United States. He could reach out to comrades in Podemos in Spain, for example.
And right now there's also, and there's opportunists now on the right that are trying to use this panic inside of Greece right now to try to take over And really, not only would this new Greece controlled by Golden Dawn would be, probably pro-American, and it would be like the Kiev government. They would be very, it would actually be just what I would say a copy of the Kiev government. If Greece was to be, taken over by neo-Nazis, which could happen, because they're trying to incite panic amongst the masses. Golden Dawn's trying to feed on that panic and trying to get people to make it seem like they're going to restore order because of the runs to the soon it's gotten to the point where people are practically running to the bank. They put amounts that they only can take out certain amounts, so if run to the bank can't happen. The Spear is negotiating, but I think that he needs to stop halt the negotiations with the EU now and just join BRICS and join, because BRICS has lended an open hand. Putin's lended an open hand for Greece to join them. And not only would Greece be more powerful than they were before, they would be better protected, and it would be a big step for good for his country. His country would be helping the good people out of this dilemma. And I think that Greece being added into the BRICS mix, becoming officially the sixth country, would be good, because I think there's instability within India and China being on BRICS. So at least there would be that country. I know definitely Brazil and Russia will stay together, but I don't know about. I'm really uncertain about India staying with BRICS, because of they're pro-Israeli now. It's not the same government that signed into BRICS, and they're pro-American. So it's very highly unlikely India will stay in BRICS in the future. But Greece joining in will fill their spot to an extent, and I think that Greece would highly benefit themselves, and I think their economy would be a lot better in a few years if they join BRICS. And that's a realistic thing that they can do right now to get out of the Eurozone and get out of the mess they are in now.
Right.
It's Greece is. Greece is not here's the thing, is that Greece needs to default to set an example, though. They need to all out not pay the debts, because then that sets an example to Portugal, Spain, Italy, and all these other countries that are mostly, it seems like it's the Mediterranean effect, is the word to call it. So that the EU, it's the countries to the north, or actually more in the center, actually, of the EU, Germany, France, Britain. These countries are the ones, right? But it's more, it's really actually more, Germany. It's Germany, France, and Britain's working with them. These countries are the ones that are benefiting the most out of the whole European situation. But these countries to the south on the Mediterranean are in all-out shambles practically. Spain's almost as bad in debt as right now as Greece is. Italy, people don't realize, is starting to go down that slope.
Well, Italy has a center-left prime minister that I wrote you about the other day. And when we're talking about debt here, we're talking about austerity as well. And, people yell slogans in the protests, austerity, solidarity. A lot of people don't understand what really austerity is, how graphic it really is. It's a direct attack, not just on the working class, but on the poor, on the retired, going after pension funds. They put in money in their own Social Security program for decades through their hard work, and now they can't retire on their pension. You have people that committed suicide over this. There was something like similar to that in 2008 in the United States, but this is even worse than the Depression in the United States in 1930 was going on in Greece, and Spain's close to that as well. You have up to 50% of the youth unemployed, and in some sections of the United States it's that bad as well, although that's being covered up. But if you look at the reality, in spite of what the bourgeois press is saying in Europe, because they're complicit with the United States covering up their disaster as well, maybe not as bad, but they're trying to portray Syriza as a bunch of radicals in the press in Germany and even among some of the Greek bourgeois press, which is hostile to the government, much like what's going on in Venezuela. But in reality, Syriza has some centrists as well. I think Tsipras himself represents the left of the Syriza coalition, because members is a coalition, not just a political party. But there are some centrists within Syriza. For example, there's people saying the new the new financial minister that was replaced after the old one stepped down after the referendum, that he's more of a centrist and being used now to negotiate with the IMF and the German and the bankers, that are financial terrorists. I mean, we should come up with an abbreviation for IMF like we did NATO, right? We used to call NATO Nazi dictator occupation. I mean, NATO's out of control. And during the Cold War, we're in past East Berlin. Now it's in Africa, the Middle East, and all these countries I've never gone to before. But what's a good abbreviation for IMF? International.
I'll say I got one bad abbreviation, but international motherfuckers. I mean, that's.
You know what? That's what I was about to say, but that's too vulgar, Chris. Come on, we have to come up with something more clever than that. That's easy. We're on a late program. This is an adult audience, but come on, Chris. I mean, what
it's
else?
9 o'clock. Okay, they can handle it. We're on prime time now. We're allowed to go to the TV, or I don't know how exactly radio ratings go, but yeah, if this is TV, this is TVMA. We're allowed to do that at this point.
Let me tell you this. Germany's refusing to pay war reparations. There's still countries that were devastated by Germany that were not compensated. Now, if you look at World War I, when Germany lost that war, the Treaty of Versailles helped bring about the rise of fascism, because Germany was already weak economically after the war, and then they had to pay these reparations that were making them even more poor, and inflation and raising the price of bread, and Hitler and the fascists took full advantage of that. Fascism had already been going on in Italy. Hitler, who was inspired by Mussolini, made his own form of fascism, which he called National Socialism. But I think now Germany's strong. It's the number. I don't think I know Germany is the number one economy, and now in Europe. So the problem is that Germany thinks, okay, we're going to pay war reparations to Greece, cut the debt in half, give in to Cyprus demand. Then there's going to be a domino effect, and former Yugoslavian countries are going to ask for reparations, et cetera, et cetera. But another way that the Greeks can get back at Germany is, and I've discussed this with the comrades in New York from Syriza when they were in exile. Many of them returned to the country now. But in one of the seminars I was in the Left Forum last year in New York, we talked about how the refugees were treated from other countries that arrived in Greece, which is very close to Turkey, and the refugees come in through Turkey, and those that are not lucky enough to arrive in Bulgaria, which is a very progressive government, gives them asylum, sends them to work in Germany. I think that now that there's a new, more pro-immigrant government, in spite of Golden Dawn making some advances in Greek parliament, that Syriza should go ahead and give those refugees asylum, then send them over to the Germans to deal with them. And that'd be a way also to get back at the Germans, not just for the historical injustice done to Greece, but of course for the current problem, for high interest rates on credit and all these other things that they do to the Greeks. And of course, you constantly hear the argument in debate, and I'd love somebody to come on and debate us on this, that, well, the Greek people claim that they had more money than they did, they took the money, they should have to pay it back. That's not true. They were Greek leaders, so-called Greek leaders that deceived the masses, okay? They were elected to power, okay? But they deceived the masses, and then on behalf of the masses, they deceived the Germans. And you know what? The Germans aren't stupid. They knew very well that they weren't going to be able to pay back these debts. They were doing what they always did, what the IMF's done, And yes, the IMF is only 20% owned by the United States, but the United States dominates the IMF because they have the guns. They can send economic hitmen. They can intimidate countries. They can turn developed countries into developing countries from the first to the third world. That's what they're trying to do to Greece. That's what they did in Venezuela before they were kicked out by Chavez. That's why there's such solidarity now between Latin Americans and the Greeks, because they see a repeating of history from 15 years ago, what they're trying to do in Greece.
Yeah, this again, like I said, there's a history of it. It's not Greece is not the first country. They're not alone either today, and they've done it in Africa. Like what they did with Zimbabwe. It looked like it was a promising start to Mugabe's time. As but the first problem that he started to feel as within a few years of after breaking ways as the British is that of course that all these sanctions that were levied caused his money to inflate, but it didn't look so bad. It just was a little bit of inflation. I mean, countries have bounced back from 30 times, 40 times inflation, but then all of a sudden it becomes 40,000 times inflation. And all of a sudden 400, 400 million times inflation. Then you literally get stuff ridiculous like a 300 billion note buys
Oh
eggs.
my God, Chris, I don't mean to get off topic, man, but I just saw something I have to mention, and it does have to do with socialism. And socialism is really the best way to fight these imperialists, these financial terrorists. The fake socialist Bernie Sanders, right? Remember Weiner? Remember that Democrat Weiner that had that sex scandal?
Oh, you mean the one that was sending messages to his interns of his dick?
Pictures of his wiener, right? And his last name Wiener, right? Yeah. So Weiner just came out and said Sanders need to explain why he's running as a Democrat, and then quote, why is he joining for the nomination party he always avoided joining? It's like, what moral authority does Weiner have to judge Sanders? Now, I don't like Sanders, but all of a sudden Weiner's now coming out of the woodworks and asking Sanders, why are you joining as a Dem? And I actually think he has a good point here because Sanders is being completely hypocritical on this. Sanders would be considered a right-wing Syriza guy, like right of center. If you compare him to Tsipras, who's a real leftist.
Well, it's Sanders finally saying that he's sold out. He's a sellout. Sanders is a sellout, and he's going to. I think he's continuing on a path of showing that more and more. I mean, with the Hillary Clinton, that he refuses to criticize Hillary Clinton. I mean, this guy has proved that he's just another Democrat more and more. And just because he uses the word socialist, I mean, I wish somebody would say this. It's like, yeah, Sanders, you might use the word socialist, but guess who else used the word socialist? Adolf Hitler. That doesn't mean shit.
Well, we don't want to compare the two, but certainly there's been a lot of fake socialists out there. And before Marx, who was more of like a rapid socialist, who wanted socialism implemented right away, in Europe you had these Fabian socialists, right? In Britain in particular, they named themselves after Emperor Fabian, who was a Roman emperor who was a gradualist in his war strategy. So they wanted a gradual type of socialism. But that wasn't effective. So you had Marx, who went into exile in England, who was a German, who countered that type of socialism and said, no, we need to advance socialism in the economy in a more progressive, more rapid way.
But the thing is that you said that comparing Sanders to Hitler would be a little bit of a stretch. However, think about it: if Sanders becomes president, he's probably going to continue all the imperialist interventions, all the war crimes, all the domestic fascism that goes on with surveillance at every corner, domestic crimes against the people, police murdering thousands within just a few years span. Actually more, not thousands within a 1 year span. Media being completely corporate controlled, and a giant portion of the country in poverty, while 400 at the top have about 80% of the money. So really, he would be just another corporate spokesman of fascist America.
Chris, let me just say this to be fair. And I don't like Sanders, but I'm a fair-minded person, okay? Let me just say this real quick. If I became president tomorrow, okay, all that would still happen. You know why? Because there needs to be revolution first. Until there's a revolution, even if you are the most well-intentioned person, the system's going to stay the same way it is. As a matter of fact, if I became president tomorrow as a third-party person, the U.S. empire would still exist, unless I wanted to be assassinated in a day like Kennedy, right? So, of course, no matter who becomes president in the country now, even if a third party is victorious, without a revolution, things will stay the same. And you have to understand, Venezuela, it wasn't just the socialists, or the Bolivarians forming a third party and getting into power in Venezuela. It was a complete counterculture and a complete revolution, a complete change of consciousness that happened in Venezuela. So it's more than just getting elected, right? It's completely replacing the system with another. And that's what happened over the years in Venezuela. And it didn't happen that gradually, It happened very rapidly. Within 10 years, the economy was completely transformed. And that's real socialism. What was it? 62% of incomes in Venezuela go to social development. They're starting to come out now towards second world country. Brazil's emerging as well as part of BRICS, and there are some socialism within the Brazilian system.
Well, I think Brazil
is much of Latin America.
I think Brazil will be the most. Brazil's already the most powerful country in South America. I think soon it'll be the most powerful country in the Western Hemisphere. think it'll surpass America within 20 years' time.
They have
the most
the natural
powerful
resources.
country.
I just hope their rainforest isn't destroyed. You know, they have other
I don't
resources.
think any of that will have to
besides
happen.
They have
Because they're
oil,
doing
like
it
the
for-
Venezuelans as well. Yeah.
We got to look at one thing. Instead, you would think that a country getting this more powerful, that their oil consumption would go up. It's actually dropped pretty drastically because the people in their country use ethanol for a lot of the vehicles nowadays, and are switching to that. And then they continue initiatives which promote economic growth without, destroying nature. Brazil will be completely on the right track, and I think that Brazil has went a little bit too far to the center left in recent years under Rousseff, but I think that they can find their way back to the times of Lula, or go even further left. I still feel, that Lula, even himself, wasn't as truly left as South America needs to be.
Well,
I think
Lula did a lot to integrate Latin America.
Left to far left.
Yeah, but Lula was a center left. I'll concede that. But he did a lot in his foreign policy to integrate other Latin American nations. He worked alongside Chavez. Rousseff needs to do that more. Yes, Rousseff went along with those Latin American nations to condemn Obama's sanctions in Venezuela. That was a good move. But Colombia did the same thing, you know what I mean? And they're a right-wing government allied to the United States. So Brazil needs to do more to integrate. Rousseff needs to focus on her foreign policy as well, like Lula did, which he was a genius in doing. You want to put the number of the show out real quick?
Yeah, that's calling 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296.
Skype, yeah.
And it's, and also if you're nuts, I don't know if we can deal with 2 straight nutty callers in a week, but it's like
people don't know that they're nuts.
It could be entertaining, I guess, a little bit.
Like Hitler said in the video, I'm going to send Bob from the South again. That guy used to call into our Blog Talk Radio program.
Oh yeah, he called in on our Syria show, the show we did one of our international, we called it the international show about Syria, where we're going to talk about the whole situation in Syria. And he called in and he said because we supported Bashar al-Assad, or as he said, how did he say, Bashar al-Assad? As he said.
Well, he was trying to call us terrorists, but I thought he was calling us tourists.
You guys are a bunch of tourist supporters. I'm like, tourist supporters? I mean, I don't have a problem with people going to see Orlando in the amusement park or whatever. That's what you're insinuating.
Hey, don't forget Busch Gardens in Tampa over on my end. But I don't see anybody calling in yet, Chris. Look, there's this guy. I don't know if you saw the video that I put up earlier today. His name's Larry Holmes. I got a lot of respect for him. I looked him up. We have like over 300 friends in common. He's a Trotskyist. To be honest, I should have known about him before. I just recently found out about him. But in a recent video, he talks about the crisis in Greece. And it is a half-an-hour long video, so there's no way I'm going to play it for the entire show because we need to, be speaking and getting callers. But I wanted to know if I could play, about the first 10 minutes of it, because last time the audio was great on that Malcolm video. You think I could play that Larry Holmes video real quick on the Greek question, and then we could have comments on that?
Well, it's 10 minutes long, guys. And your audio is not really good on your end at all. I'm just saying it's like.
Well, the video would probably be louder than me because the video quality. I checked the recording of the Malcolm video, the recording that I did last.
Yeah, but you had better. You had like double the volume last week. I'm just saying I don't know what's up with your.
I'll play 5 minutes, and if in the middle of it it's too low, just tell me and I'll stop it.
Okay, try to play it, but I don't think the audio.
All right, I'm only going to do for 5 minutes because no matter how many minutes you put in, everything the guy's saying is fascinating. You can find the video on YouTube and look up Larry Holmes on the crisis in Greece. Holmes, Holmes. So let me play this real quick. It's loading. Hold on. Sorry about the play.
You can what I want to do is comment on Greece and a few other developments that are going on in the nation.
Ow. Sound quality is not good on that at all.
That's not good.
I can't hear it at all, barely. Like I can't tell anything what he's saying.
All right, I put a stop to the video, but anybody can look up this guy. He's part of the WSWS.org website. The Trotskyist part of the Fourth International. They're very respected website. How about I don't want to get too off topic, but it's really sad. One of the greatest, I think, the first Arab actor ever.
Omar Sharif,
Omar Sharif passed away. It's really sad. And if you look at what's going on in the Middle East with homophobia, it's sad as well because his grandson, I believe Omar Sharif's son is named Tarek, but Omar Sharif's grandson is named Omar Sharif Jr. And Omar Sharif Jr. came out gay a couple of years ago, and he lives in Egypt. So you can imagine what it'd be like admitting you're gay in Egypt. I mean, Egypt's a little progressive on those issues, but very controversial. But Omar Sharif, from what I know, was accepting of his grandson. He was a very progressive person, a great actor, a great mind. He worked alongside other actors that are great as well, like Antonio Banderas. I don't know if you remember, Banderas came out in an interview last year speaking about Chavez. And the woman that was interviewing him from CNN Espanol was in shock when he said it. But she said, how we change the political system? He said, well, we have to do it like Chavez. And he was talking about Hugo Chavez. So, Banderas also a very progressive actor. And he was friends with Sharif. They did a wonderful movie together, 13th Warriors. So, yeah, it's very sad that we lost Omar Sharif.
It's like, I think that sometimes people think that, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, I think the homophobia, it's going to be really bad over there. But, it's like people would think that Iran or whatever, it's bad because of some comments made by Ahmadinejad that were a little bit mistranslated. And, there were just comments, because, people there are generally accepting, number one. And I've seen cases where, in some of these Muslim countries, people think that in a country where Islam is the dominant religion that they wouldn't be accepting that, but where they've had marriages of I saw like there were like two lesbians that were getting married in one of those Muslim countries I saw on Facebook. I was kind of surprised a little bit. So I think that again, it's one of those Western misconceptions as being homophobic. Probably 60 years ago they would use that against them. Nowadays, it's being homophobic is generally viewed badly amongst Americans, so they're going to try to make it seem like that Middle East is homophobic, but it's not exactly true. They try to demonize Muslims in general. Another thing that they use to demonize Muslims because it's almost widely, partially because of the Israel lobby, that they mix one of the tactics they do is they mix Muslims' dislike for the Zionist regime. That's not only Muslims don't like Jews, Christians, because of their murdering of Palestinians, but they say that's anti-Semitic, and they try to paint out Muslims as generally anti-Semitic people. So it's one of the tactics they use. I'm going to just point out is that they try to paint out Muslims as generally intolerant people, or that sometimes they go even as far to say as that that they're racist, that they're they literally, I've literally heard everything practically about I've heard everything about Muslims, about what they, how intolerant they supposedly are, but when you see the actual the countries where they do have the high intolerancy, it's because of very very biased media, the Gulf states having complete control of the media, and it turns the people there into to be not accepting of a lot of things, especially like in Saudi Arabia is the biggest example, which the United States is one of the biggest financiers of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is probably next to Israel, America's biggest ally in the Middle East. I call them it's the dirty three: U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia. And these people, and it's like I want to shift the financial terrorist designation to what they've done. They not only do they've literally used the financial terrorists, the bankers have financed actual terrorists as we picture them, the ones that do suicide bombings, the ones that are killing people that are not Muslim in the Middle East against Bashar al-Assad because he is against the Rothschilds. So they send mercenaries and they finance terrorists in Syria to attack Assad's regime. And also because Assad, there's many reasons actually they attack Assad, but the main one is because he's against the Rothschilds, against Zionism, against, and he's going to firmly stand his ground. He's not going to just roll over. They know that if the United States invaded, it would actually be a real war. And the United States is near an invasion. I want to point out because the Brookings Institute, which is one of those right wing think tanks that a lot of times the government agenda it's kind of spilled through those. They kind of, I don't know, sometimes the think tanks that it's kind of, a think tank, the best way to describe it is usually either in America it's either a group of people that are connected to the government or people that influence the government. Other ones that you might hear all the time, Project for a New American Century, a very disturbing think tank, and you should read about what they've said before, literally pretty much suggesting Americans should be made slaves to giant corporations, but the Brookings Institute was pretty much saying that a war with Syria is inevitable and it's going to happen within this year probably. And we probably won't even reach 2016 without seeing an invasion of Syria. And I think that this Jade Helm 15, where they're training for martial law, it all coincides.
Well, the negotiations with Iran have failed. I mean, negotiations throughout the world have been failing, but it looks like negotiations with Iran have failed. And what Obama's going to do is what he always does: be a political coward, blame it on Congress, and not step up to the plate. I mean, I'm just sick of this fake prophet shit. That he's the peace-loving president, the Black Messiah, like Dr. King, like Malcolm, blah blah blah. I start getting really pissed off when I see African Americans with T-shirts, that show Malcolm and Dr. King and then Obama as if they're the same thing. The only thing they have in common, the only thing Dr. King and Obama have in common is they both got the Peace Prize, and they're both black, and they both have PhDs. Nothing else. Well, maybe both were considered leaders in their own way, but that's it. I mean, ideologically, they're completely different. As a matter of fact, Malcolm and Dr. King had ideological differences as well. So you're talking about complex people here. Just to say that they're all the same, part of the same legacy because they happen to be black. I mean, I find that degrading. Even though I'm not African American. So these people need to get educated. They need to see Obama for the fake that he is. As a matter of fact, there was some African Americans at the forum recently in Philly who weren't critical of Obama enough, not because they support him, but they think, well, Obama represents the establishment, but him personally is a good guy, right? I'm not going to even say that because, like I said earlier, yes, no matter how good you are or well-intentioned you are in the current system without a revolution, the empire is going to continue, the injustices are going to continue, but also because, as I just stated, he's a political coward. I mean, Colonel West should call him for what he is, what Malcolm would call him, a house slave. He's gone on along with the establishment as a coward, not looking out for his own people. Matter of fact, supported the lynchings of black Libyans in Benghazi, supported ISIS in Syria and Iraq, condemned Egypt for retaliating against ISIS, which is in their right, the ISIS in Libya, because they like ISIS in Libya, right? As long as ISIS in Libya, the ISIS supports them. But when they're over in Syria, when they're over in Iraq, they don't. And even to an extent in Syria today, the United States still supports ISIS. It's not going after them enough. Has used it as a facade to go after the Syrian regime. And people might say, well, we're supposed to be talking about financial terrorists here. But look, the real terrorists are the imperialists. And they use these financial institutions to justify destabilizing democratic governments that are a threat to them. And they considered Assad a threat to the establishment.
And Assad's a democratic government. Everybody says that he's a dictator. Everybody claims that. But he just had an election in 2014.
Well, a large swath of the population couldn't vote then. But that's not necessarily Assad's fault because ISIS is preventing them from voting as well.
And not only that is that the reason why he had 88% of the vote, people say, oh, that's just too high of a number to be legit. It's that people don't want to change guard in the middle of a civil war. It's like they wouldn't want to go to another president right now, the president that's carried them, and at times has almost eliminated the terrorist threat inside of Syria. I mean, I feel like that he's pushing them back slowly, but it's at one point in 2013, I think that's when he had almost won the Syrian civil war. But then the ISIS came up, and the United States government heavily funded them, and then the Syrian rebels all of a sudden were back to life. And then they had a giant offensive and took over big parts of Syrian land. But now Bashar al-Assad has been pushing them back since. However, it's very slow because the United States has been doing airstrikes that have been attacking the Syrian government. So now it's practically, you have the Syrian rebels, the ones that, the supposed moderates, even though they're not moderate at all, they're just the extremists as ISIS, the Free Syrian Army, are very close. I mean, they do, I don't know, you can't even, I mean, there was a Free Syrian Army propaganda, it was actually an epic fail, and it was laughable, or a Free Syrian Army propaganda video where the one of the people in the video suicide vest exploded on camera. It's pretty funny because
While we're talking about ISIS, I just saw an update. It says leaked video ISIS propaganda beheadings, quote unquote, filmed in Hollywood studio, and it doesn't really surprise me because if you see a lot of these beheadings, and I'm not saying they didn't happen, but some of them were staged because in the moment that the head's supposed to come off, the camera fades. And when Al Qaeda did that, they showed the entire thing. I remember that. But now it looks more like a Hollywood video, not like some amateur video done in a cave in Afghanistan. Which raises my doubts about the authenticity of some of these videos.
And look. Also, let's look at one of the conspiracies behind one of these beheadings. They talk about how James Foley got beheaded by ISIS. They don't talk about who sold him to ISIS, the Free Syrian Army. The Free Syrian Army sold James Foley to ISIS. And, so the Free Syrian Army proves that they're complicit. They're all one the same. They're all just as bad Islamists that are trying to take over Syria. And they're not, and, I don't even know, I kind of don't like using the word Islamist because they disgrace the face of Islam. Not only do they do that, is that they are, a lot of them are not very religious at all. Like the people in ISIS are not that religious. It's funny. There was somebody that was captive by ISIS that got home. And he said that they didn't have Korans there. Is that they're purely for money. You can actually take the two I's and then put them over the S's, on ISIS, and it makes a big dollar sign. But that's what they're about. They're mercenaries, and they were brought in by the West. And yes, they are. They're probably a lot of them driven by religion, but they might be driven by religion, but they're not driven by real Islam. They're driven by false doctrine.
Well, they're driven by greed because they have a lot of money. They stole a lot of things and was supported by rich people. But one of the people that was held captive by ISIS and released said they didn't even have a copy of the Quran in the camp, so they don't even know their own supposed religion that they're using to justify these acts. You can say the same thing about Zionism, which obviously, Mossad supported ISIS, so there's a connection there as well historically with the Wahhabis. But, the Zionists, in great part were started by non-religious or even atheist Jews, of Jewish background, but that, didn't believe in the religion, but also believed in using the religion to justify their ideology, which was the ideology of Zionism.
It's an ideology of hate. It's an ideology of colonialism. And really, their rhetoric, by the Zionist rabbis at times really reflects. I mean, I've literally seen many things were just in different words that were practically what Hitler had said at times about Jews. When they talk about Palestinians, how they call them subhuman animals. Literally, some of the same rhetoric is being spouted at. Or this is one that at one time. Hitler, the part of the final solution was to, put Jews in deportation camps, which were later known as concentration camps, where they were killed off. But one of Likud members suggested the very same thing not that long ago about putting Palestinians in deportation camps. So it's like literally this Likud member, that's the same party that Netanyahu belongs to, remember that, had set pretty much in a way wanted to start pretty much declare an official Holocaust against the Palestinians. They've already done it. It's already been a Holocaust. Over 1 million Palestinians have died over Israeli hands over the years in a tiny country. This is not like Germany. The actual percentage of the population that were killed in just this, or that were affected in this recent Operation Protective Edge, 5% of the Palestinian people were directly affected by either being killed, injured, or made homeless during Operation Protective Edge. That doesn't even count family members that were, their immediate family members that lost children, or people that are people, family members of the injured, or family members of now that, all of a sudden one of their family members is homeless. I mean, I bet the amount must have totaled out to be the hundreds of thousands that were, affected indirectly by Operation Protective Edge. It really affected so much of the country. And so but the Zionists and the Zionists and the Nazis parallel each other so much, and so do these Islamists, these extremists like ISIS, where they have fake sheiks, these people that put out a phony Islamic doctrine of hatred. Instead of what actually Quran actually preaches peace, and there's probably right now at least I'm tired of you guys. I'm tired of these people that are in the truther community. They're supposed truthers, but yet want to incite hate against people. These people that there's people in the truther community that half the time they're talking about Muslims and how Muslims are guided by hate or whatever, and they say that Muslims are trying to, I can't believe that they literally just take Fox propaganda and just put it to the extreme. Some of these people say that that Muslims are taking over this country and now we're going to be under Sharia law within a short time. And it's bullshit. What America's going to be under? It's going to be under Zionist, U.S. Yankee and martial law, where the Zionists and the United States government are going to remain complicit. Of course, the fake Muslims, the Saudis, the House of Saud, I want to also, is that yes, this country is going to be under a lot stricter control, but it's not going to be by Muslims. And in fact, when martial law happens, Muslims are going to face. I have a bad feeling what the United States government's going to do because they already have the Islamophobia installed in the people. Now all the United States government has to do is tell them to go along with what's the actions that they're about to do, and most Americans won't stand up for them. Unfortunately, it's tragedy. How people have been brainwashed in this country by the media, the corporate media. And really, it's gotten more in this last 20 years.
Sorry,
got more
Chris,
racist than they were before.
To the conversation the past couple of minutes, I just had to sign out of Facebook because I'm dealing with a racist, ignorant idiot in the debate about reparations for African Americans. But what's ironic is that I don't know how the hell this neo-Nazi ended up on the page of a black girl. And the black girl posted up a picture. I have to say this. We talk about racism, and it just happened. In the picture, it shows the burning of the Confederate flag, and then it shows African Americans pooping on the American flag. And it says, if you think that this picture, the one on the bottom, is not offensive, but this one is not offensive either, like the burning of the Confederate flag, then you are what's wrong with America. And that's an African American girl saying that against her own people. Like, I'm not one to judge if they want to poop on the American flag. The Americans, not just the Confederacy, had instituted slavery against their ancestors and it maintains a racist system.
I'd say burn both the flags.
Burn both the flags. Exactly. If you don't want to burn both the flags, you're a hypocrite. I agree with that. But and I said, no, what's wrong with America is that we still have a race system even under a black president, and that African Americans haven't had reparations for slavery. And this fucking neo-Nazi, he starts talking about the Jews, the Holocaust, denying it, and all these other things. It's like, how the fuck did a neo-Nazi end up on the page of a black African American girl? But I think to myself, well, the black African American girl, well, it's kind of redundant. The African American girl, young woman, she posted an image like that. It doesn't really surprise me now that she'd have friends that are neo-Nazi. She's the example of the house slave of the self-hating African American, like Obama. And as a matter of fact, Obama's half white, and he was raised by his white grandparents who he admits were racist. Because I read in his autobiography that he heard his grandmother use the N-word. He went to top universities. He wasn't rich, but he was able to go to top universities. He had privileges that other African Americans don't. He's not related to any slaves. His wife is, as are most African Americans. But his father was an African immigrant. Not
just not really enthused. I want to point out this guy he was a very powerful man back in Kenya. So
I heard his father was the upper class in Kenya, and and I guess he didn't get his inheritance because he was poor growing up. But either way, like, he's not a product of African Americanism, Obama. I mean, yeah, he's dark and he's American, but the way he was brought up, the schools that he went to, it's not reminiscent of your average African American. And, the blacks in Chicago hate Obama because he hasn't taken care of them, even though he represented them as a congressman and as a senator and as an organizer.
And, yeah, I saw, I saw, I saw a little bit of that debate you got into. I mean, so what? Are you just saying neo-Nazi is an insult, or was he what? He was actually denying the Holocaust on there?
Well, he said that, why don't Jews ask for reparations to the Germans? And I said they have, and they've received compensation from Germany in some European countries. And I said, as a matter of fact, today, Greece has got reparations, or is asking reparations from Germany. He says, fuck the Greeks, the Jews don't have evidence, that the Germans did injustices to them, and this and that. So the guy's a freaking Holocaust denier, basically a neo-Nazi, ends up on this girl's page and is trying to debate me. It's freaking ridiculous. So,
that's crazy, and the thing is that I hate when people also, again, is like, this is another problem the truther community is that people are like, they'll be like saying, they'll be spending that Nazi rhetoric or whatever, or they'll be saying that be denying the Holocaust or whatever, and then they'll be like, yeah, I do this because this is how I'm against the government. It's like, well, the government supports the same people in Ukraine like you. So what? You could just go to West Ukraine, become one of those people, and then to enjoy a lot of funding from the United States government, and you would still get to keep all your stupid beliefs.
Well, the U.S. has literally sent troops into West Ukraine. So has Canada. So has the Poles. As a matter of fact, the Poles have more of a right to go into Ukraine than the United States because they're neighbors. They're defending their strategic interests, which I think they'd be better off aligning with Russia. But supposedly when Russia sends tanks to the border, because there's never any evidence that Russia sent tanks into Ukraine. That's propaganda. But when Russians send tanks into their own border, and they feel threatened by the Russophobes, the fascists trying to enter East Ukraine, then the United States condemns that and makes sanctions against Russia. But the United States can send troops halfway across the world to the border of Russia, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, where's the logic here? Why do people keep buying this propaganda? This old Russophobia that started in the Cold War. The Russians lost between 25 million to 30 million people because of the German invasion of their country. So you're going to tell me that they're going to compare Putin to Hitler? And I'm no Putin fan, but I've read up on this. Putin's family survived the Nazi invasion of Leningrad. So they are Nazi survivors themselves, even if they're not Jewish. The Russians are also survivors of Nazi horrors, but you don't hear about that in the West because they want to maintain the Russophobia. As a matter of fact, D-Day was essential to the defeat of Nazism, but only 10%. By the time D-Day came, 90% of the Nazis were already defeated by the Russians. So, if you wanted to punish a Nazi soldier, you send him to the Russian front because that would mean probably to their death. Because the Russians, initially the Germans were able to advance into Russia, thanks great part to Stalin. But after that, the Russians put up a great fight, and that was thanks to the Russian people, in spite of Stalin, who was hiding in a bunker over Moscow. The incredible resistance in Leningrad and all those cities that were under siege, shows the resilience of the Russian people, which is still within Russian culture today. So when you see Russophobia, it really pisses me off when I know these facts. My grandfather himself was a Jew of Russian extraction. I mean, not only that, but the Islamophobia, the advances in civilization, the compass that Columbus used was invented by Arabs. The Arabs invented the compass. They invented many things. So, these men wouldn't have been able to travel to go and do what they did without the inventions, without the intelligence of the Arab culture, including many Muslims. So when you see Islamophobia, it pisses me off as well, because this is just based off of ignorance, off of hate, and we have to combat that with socialism, because look what happened in Yugoslavia under Tito. Muslims, Christians, people of different backgrounds, Croats, Bosnians, etc., were able to come together and as one nation against Stalin and Hitler and be successful because of real socialism. Tito, was very similar to Trotsky in his thinking and united his people. And then, of course, within 10 years after his death, Yugoslavia was divided up by the West, by NATO, with Bill Clinton going in there and bombing and stuff. And they said it was to defend the Muslim population of Bosnia. It's always out of some justification for humanitarianism. I mean, to call what happened in Libya humanitarianism is a joke. You know, I mean, look at Libya today. Look how united they were under Gaddafi, with the exception of Benghazi. I mean, you know, the divisions of Benghazi were taken advantage of by the CIA, and former Al-Qaeda people that were held in Guantanamo were sent back to Libya to take over. Now, look, if a government was torturing me and holding me in a cell, and then right after they want me to work for them, would I do that? No, I'd hate that government. But I think what happened was that Libyan, I forget his name, who was head of the resistance in Benghazi, was held in Guantanamo. He was probably treated like a king in that prison. And it was planned all along for him to be sent to Guantanamo to Libya to destabilize the government there. And it wasn't just the United States, it was European nations, NATO. You know, they bombed the hell out of a city in Libya, and then when the rebels come in, they said that, well, the rebels were victorious. That's not a real war.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to point out, you know, supposedly a guy that's against the system and against the war crimes in the United States and NATO, Bernie Sanders, well, guess what? You know what his vote was back in 99? He voted for the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, which, yes, it was still technically Yugoslavia at the time.
It was a Democrat doing it. He went alongside the Democrats as usual. He didn't join up with them, but he went alongside it. And now that he's actually joining up with them, there's, like, no dispute there, you know?
Yeah, and the Yugoslavia, I mean, it was a very stable country for 35 years, with Tito making sure that Tito kept the Muslims from Christians from feuding with each other and united them under the banner of socialism for all that time. And he united the country against the United States and against Stalin. And Stalin tried to kill him many times, but he wrote a famous letter back to Stalin, telling it's like, keep sending your assassins, but it's what was it in it?
He said, mine will not miss. I'll send one to you, and mine will not miss. So you better stop doing it. And then Stalin did stop doing it. The only language Stalin understood was, firm language like that. And Tito was a survivor. The Nazis were searching for him. They killed all the leaders of the anti-fascists, and he was one of the few left. And they ended up leading his country. And he refused to be intimidated by the Stalinists because, unlike other nations in Yugoslavia, the Russians did not do much to help them. They themselves, their own resistance, who Tito was a part of, were able to kick the Nazis out. So the Russians couldn't come in like other nations and say, well, you owe us. We helped get rid of the Nazis. That didn't work in Yugoslavia.
And also, because Yugoslavia took a bigger loss than the United States and many countries. They were one of the top losses that they took. The Kingdom of Yugoslavia at the time that fought in World War II. Shortly after World War II, they became a socialist, I think it was a Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia under Tito from 1940.
Stalin supported the regime in Albania to counter Yugoslavia. You know what I mean? But Yugoslavia were successfully able to stop that. Now, that's probably when the first plans to instill the rebellion of the Kosovar Albanians was coming into play, because the Albanians that immigrated over the years to Kosovo, which was in Yugoslavia at the time, which was part of Serbia, the Serbian part of Yugoslavia. These were Muslims, and they were trying to take advantage of those divisions. That it didn't work because they had a strong leadership under Tito, under socialism. But later on, they took advantage of that and used the Kosovar situation with the Albanians to separate them from the Serbians, start this whole war. And now you have Kosovo, its own country, which is part of the EU. Now, I'm for the independence of some nations, but part of Kosovo is still Serbian. There's a Serbian Christian minority that feel oppressed within Kosovo. So I think the whole invention of Kosovo as a country was an imperialist project. But
yeah, and there was
you want to put the number one more time?
718-717-8296. It's think about it: Macedonia, Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia.
Don't forget Croatia. That's what Tito was from.
Yeah, Croatia. All these countries used to be one. They were almost in a Soviet style. When I talk about Soviet style, was many different republics.
Leninist Soviet.
Yeah, were put into one giant country, Yugoslavia, a powerful country, and then and they were, Tito, he took control. And also, you didn't talk about the Tito actually survived 3 different wars that he fought directly in. He fought in both the world wars. War One as Austro-Hungarian, which he was known for his valor and his bravery in that war.
Yeah, he had experience under his belt. Yeah. By the time the resistance,
that's where he met the Bolsheviks during that war, and then he fought in the Russian Civil War. Then 25 years later, he goes on to fight in the World War II against the Nazis with the anti-fascist partisans in Yugoslavia.
That's the point. He fought in 3 wars, and luckily he never had to fight a fourth. He never had to fight a civil war because he maintained the unity in his country.
And think about it. World War II, he fought directly, and he was already. He was already in his 40s or so, or maybe he was around 50 years old. So he's actually. He still was.
He died in his 80s. He lived a long life.
Yeah, he actually. He was almost 90 when he died. He died. I think he was born He was born in 92, and he died in 1980. So yeah, he was 50 years old.
Well, remember this.
Remember in the middle where he was when he was fighting World War II.
Freud, Stalin, Trotsky, and Tito were all in the same city at the same time, within a few blocks of each other. They're all in Vienna, in Austria, right? Because you mentioned the Austro-Hungarian Empire existed at that time, right? They all happen to be in the same city at the same time. It's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah, and like I said, he fought in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. That's what I was talking about. With the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, in World War One, and he was known for his valor and his bravery. That's kind of where he learned how to be, a soldier. And then he went to the Bolshevik. He went to the Bolshevik. He fought with the Bolsheviks, and then World War II later, and Yugoslavia. I think a lot of people also forget actually. Interesting fact, what actually existed since the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. It was a country that came as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire falling apart. One of the countries that was split off of it was Yugoslavia, but it was not the same Yugoslavia that Tito was in charge of. This is the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. It had a king.
Yeah, there was a Republic of Yugoslavia that existed up to the year 2003. So when these other nations broke off from Yugoslavia and made their own nations, there was still a Yugoslavian republic up till about 10 years ago. And it wasn't immediately after Tito's death that Yugoslavia fell apart. It was about 10 years later, around the time that the Soviet Union fell. So by 1990, that's when you started seeing the war into the 90s, and Clinton intervened that split up Yugoslavia.
It was 92 is when the Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia formally fell apart. And then from 92 to 2003, which was only an 11-year time, there was still technically Yugoslavia was still a country on the map. However, it was only Serbia, Bosnia, and I think Macedonia were the only 3 countries that were part of it that are today, and Kosovo. So
they became their own nations. Kosovo became its own nation way later on. Kosovo became its own nation when I was in Europe, 2007, 2008. But you had a small Republic of
those
Yugoslavia.
Are the current modern countries that were part of the smaller Yugoslavia that existed for the last 11 years of Yugoslavia's history. And then in 2003, Yugoslavia formally actually what happened was, I think not Macedonia, but Bosnia split off, and then after it was just Serbia and Macedonia together, and it was his own country. I think it was called something like Serbia and Macedonia.
And when we're talking about Macedonia, we're talking about the Republic of Macedonia as well, because there's Greek Macedonia, and they don't consider themselves Slavic. So you have different ethnicities there.
Yeah, and then in 2006, Macedonia split off. I think something like that, and then a lot of split-offs happened from 92 to 2008.
Well, I was in Spain. I was in Europe in 2006, and by then Macedonia was already part of the EU, I believe. The Republic of Macedonia had already split off from Yugoslavia. But yeah, there was a lot of divisions there. And look, I'm not against certain nations getting their independence. For example, the Catalans in Spain. I believe they're entitled to that. I mean, they were persecuted by Franco. They wouldn't even let them speak their own language. I mean, Catalan is its own language. It's not what a lot of tourists think when they go to Spain, that dialect of Spanish. And I'll give you an example. The only thing I know how to say in Catalan is bona nit, which means good night. And if you see what the words for good night are in Spanish, buenas noches, they don't sound anything alike. Now, if you say bonsoir or bona notte in Italian or French, that sounds more like Catalan. So there's several words in Catalan that don't even sound similar to Castilian Spanish. So they have their own language, they have their autonomy, they want to be independent, and I believe they're entitled to that, just as we had supported Scottish independence. Now, if you see imperialist projects like Kosovo, that's not real independence there. These were Albanians that were imported in there first by Stalin, who tried to divide up Yugoslavia, later by the United States. And, these Albanian Kosovars, I mean, yes, they're a majority of Kosovo, but the northern part of Kosovo are Serbian Christians. They shouldn't have to leave into Serbia. They're entitled to stay there. They shouldn't be a oppressed minority. All these people were divided up by the empire. Divide and conquer, as Julius Caesar put it.
And it's in the Balkan region too, So it's like, literally the Balkanization. That's where
that word comes from. Dividing up, balkanizing. We're talking about the balkanization of Iraq, based on different sects, Shia, Sunni, etc. The balkanization that comes from the Balkans. That comes from what happened to Yugoslavia.
And I want to point out, one thing is that. Is that Kosovo, the independence protesters that were trying to split off of Serbia, they were literally holding flags or literally along with their, Albanian flag, they were holding the flags of the United States with it. They're holding American flags. So that shows everything, that they were, going to be completely dependent republic on the United States, and they're not independent from anybody. They're just independent from Serbia now and traded to be part of the empire. So Kosovo is an imperial construct, and it's not like Macedonia or something like that has retained a fair share.
Macedonia has a long history that goes back to Alexander the Great. This Kosovo nation is really an invention of the past 20 years. But before that, it was part of Serbia. It was always part of Serbia, even though there was a lot of.
You know what it is? Kosovo sets a bad precedent because it said that Albanians that live in that country could not get along with Christians in that country, Serbian Christians, and that set a precedent in the international community that if there's a minority in a country that doesn't fit in, instead of the government working to assimilate that minority or to make a culture that's accepting of both, they can just split it off, and then they just have a bunch of countries split off by minorities. And then, in that it's not, and we're starting to have, that means that in America we could have many different countries because there's areas, where there's, like perhaps with that same precedent, Miami could say, the Hispanics in Miami could say that they're not fitting in with the American culture, and then they could split off. Or in Russia, the Muslims in the South part, a giant part of Russia could succeed.
Well, look, Chechnya has existed for a long time. But there's many Chechens that want to stay part of Russia for economic reasons, and Russia has a lot of history of Muslim influence. I mean, if you look at the domes of the Kremlin, that shows Muslim influence in the architecture, much like the Muslim influence in Spain. So a lot of Muslims, they've been part of Russia for a long time. They want to stay part of Russia. There's a section of Chechen that are extremists that want to separate. The Boston bombers were descended from some of these Chechens. But the point is that. Just because there's a section of the Chechens that want to be independent or separate from Russia doesn't represent them all either. So when we're talking about these things, take Kashmir, for example, right? Some of the Kashmiris are Hindus and want to stay part of India. Some of the Kashmiris are Muslim and want to stay part of Pakistan. And then there's a section of the Kashmiris that want to be independent as well. So their sentiment should be taken into consideration. But these regions as a whole, we have to understand the complexities there before we decide whether we want to support their independence or not. You have these activists that won't study the history, that are too lazy. They'll just be like, oh, they want to be independent. Let's go ahead and support them. Like, oh, they want to have an uprising in Libya. They're part of the Arab Spring. Let's go ahead and support them. Not knowing anything about Gaddafi, not knowing where to find Libya on the map. So they need to do their homework first before they make a position of, am I going to support this group or not? And they're uprising for independence or for ousting a so-called tyrant or whatever.
And it's I think that Arab Spring shouldn't even be, it's really the thing is like half the countries that were in Arab Spring they were in imperialist-supported revolutions. There were legitimate protests, sure. There were the ones in Egypt against the imperialist puppet Mubarak, or against the president of Morocco that got, they fell to concessions, unfortunately. Or
Morocco's owned by the king and ruled by the king. So the president.
Yeah, and it's a pro-American king too.
Yeah.
Or Bahrain, that was a legitimate revolution that's still going on right now. But there was also illegitimate ones like Libya or Syria, and they consider that Arab Spring. They consider both Arab Spring, but you can't really, those were quotation revolutions were supported by the West. And, these people, I would say neither Gaddafi nor Assad were tyrants, and they definitely weren't holding their country back like they were trying to claim in the Western media. In fact, Gaddafi had pushed that country to be the second highest human development index in all of Africa. And in Syria, Assad had brought it to a modern country, and so did his father. Had helped it bring to a modern country from, in the past where it was kind of it still hadn't done much ever since they had become free from the French all the way back in the 1920s up till about in the 60s. Really not much progress had been done, and with many different military strongmen, and until finally in 1963 the Baas party took over, and then Hafez al-Assad took over in 1970, and then 30 years later Bashar took over. They had done a ton of progress in those 50 years ever since the Baas party took power, compared to what they had done in the 40 before. And not only that, progress humanitarianly, and considering how they had a country really divided by religion. I mean, there's a big portion that are Christian. In fact, Syria is one of the last places where there are still people in Syria that speak the same language, Aramaic,
right? Aramaic, yeah.
Yeah. They still speak that in some parts of Syria. That's one of the horrific tactics they used against the Syrian Christians during the Syrian Civil War that they crucified them, the rebels. They would crucify Christians.
Jesus probably knew that the language he was speaking, Aramaic, which is a Semitic language similar to Arabic and Hebrew, but predates Hebrew, predates Arabic, obviously. Jesus probably knew the Aramaic came from Syria. And not only that, but I believe the gate to the entrance of Jerusalem, even in the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago, was called like the Damascus Gate. And you talk about the road to Damascus, and there's all these references to Syria in the Bible, several sacred sites of Christianity in Syria. So it wasn't just pagan sites that the ISIS was attacking; it was Christian sites. And while they were being supported by the CIA, which is made up of a nation comprised mostly of Christians, ironically, as well as the Mossad supporting ISIS. But then they went ahead and got out of control and went after these sites. And it's just U.S. imperialism backfiring as usual. You have people that say, well, the United States helped support the Mujahideen, who later became Al-Qaeda and Taliban in the 80s. So that's in the past. They don't do that anymore. Well, they did the same exact thing in Libya, supporting terrorists there, supporting the terrorists from the Golan, that Israel controls, sending them into Syria, Iraq, etc. The United States, up to this day, or up to the very recent history, is doing the same exact thing, making the same exact mistakes. And they say when you forget history, you're destined to repeat it. And these mistakes historically are being repeated by the empire.
And yeah, and it just continues and continues. Ever Carter, under the Carter administration, the 70s, and then going into the Reagan administration, they funded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the pro-Soviet Democratic People's Republic of Afghanistan. I think that was the official title of the country. And then they had the Mujahideen take down that government, and then Afghanistan fell into a country that was within literally 15 years of the Taliban the Mujahideen became the Taliban, taking power of Afghanistan. They fell back, they fell back about 50 years in progress. I mean, Afghanistan was quite modern at the time of at the time of the 80s, and there was it was a completely secular country, and then literally 10 years later, it was completely different, and they were already falling behind, and Kabul was already starting to all progress had been halted there, and then they had Sharia law implemented. It was no longer secular to any means, and Libya is even though right now that there's a government is not the way of the Taliban was in Afghanistan. What they have is a lot of Islamists controlling big portions of the country, including ISIS themselves, and the same beaches where literally Europeans used to do tourism at. The ISIS executioners are executing Coptic Christians belonging to Egypt, and that's when Sisi wanted to respond with airstrikes, and he did, and Obama criticized him because they like ISIS in Libya, and I think they like ISIS. It's not really that they even like them just general regions. I think they like them everywhere because they do their agenda. Because even Iraq, the British were dropping supplies, and they caught Iraqi residents were saying that the United States was supporting ISIS in their region, and I think that in all reality is that that the current Iraqi government is not that pro-American anymore, and has actually became more pro-Irani, and so are the forces, and the people are more pro-Irani than they ever have been. So now they're using ISIS kind of to quell that, and they're trying to. I think that right now they're trying to do kind of like a. This is their plan B, since their original plan of putting in Maliki, the prime minister before, a complete puppet like him didn't work out. This is plan B, is that they unleash the hounds of ISIS out. It's like in Egypt is kind of a similar scenario. It's like Mubarak would be preferably to have been the president of Egypt to this day, because they had him under control. He was under United States commands. But the people rose up, and the revolution happened. But they could control the revolution by putting in, by infiltrating Muslim Brotherhood, and then putting people like Morsi in power, who would eventually quell to Western influence, and and then that didn't work out for Egypt. And then they have another revolution, and some people were legitimate protesters, and then this time they put in Sisi, and it looks like Sisi hasn't done anything for the Palestinians, and he doesn't seem to be doing it. He seems to be not doing anything against the West in general. And now the United States has unfroze its aid that they said they were going to freeze to Egypt, and now they're giving them aircraft. So there's at first it looked like Egypt and the United States would actually have tensions at each other, but in reality, they're giving military aid to them. So that proves that it looks like the Sisi is another one of their puppets. But we're got a little bit off track, and I want to get back to the topic a little bit. And I want to also put out the number, since we have 28 minutes to go. 718-717-8296, 718-8296, or 718-717-8296. We talk about financial. We're talking about financial terrorists. How about the financial terrorists that happened? This terrorism that used to happen in Cyprus not that long ago. Remember Cyprus? They had a situation very similar to what happened in Greece. What's going on in Greece now what happened a few years ago, but it was even worse. In fact, I've kind of, Cyprus is kind of the example of exactly what they're trying to accomplish in Greece, because of how bad the Cyprus economic collapse was 4 years ago. They took anybody had over $100,000 in the bank, people that had legitimately earned that money, by the super rich, took from the upper middle class and the middle class. They just took that money. It's called a haircut. They just took the money right from them. They were like they had at that time they had a communist government in Cyprus that they did not like, the bankers. So they did so many. They forced the Cyprus government to do so many terrible things to force with the international pressure, to the people, that the people turned against the communist government. It's really the bankers levied such a terrible economic situation that they blamed it on the communist government, and they pushed the communist government out. And that's what I think they want to do in Greece. They want to make the situation so bad in Greece that, right now that's what the bankers' plan is, that they'll force Tsipras out of Greece and then Golden Dawn will show up, and then it'll become another West Ukraine scenario, and Golden Dawn will be the supposed people that bring order.
You know what's ironic about the Golden Dawn in Greece and the National Front in France? They tend to be pro-Russian, but they actually do have more in common, in spite of that, ideologically, with the West Ukrainians. And I think the reason why they're pro-Russian is because they don't like the EU, just like real socialists don't like the EU either. So they see as a counterforce the EU, Russia. And ironically, they don't like the United States either because the United States helped prop up the EU. So they're like a alternative type of fascism that's what's predominant in the EU foreign policy or in the policy of the United States.
Yeah. But like I said, is that Golden Dawn, however, they can change the agenda a little bit to fit what with these, especially like for example in West Ukraine, one of the main fascist parties wasn't. Nowadays, it's not anti-Semitic. Back a few years ago, it was anti-Semitic, but now it's supportive. It's openly supportive of Israel. This party, thus not right sector, but the Svoboda party, which is the ultra-nationalist Ukrainian fascist party. They toned down their anti-Semitic rhetoric, and now are supportive of Israel. Because that's part of the that's how they've been engineered now, because now they're a pro-Western party, and that's what I think could easily happen to Golden Dawn if they take power. And even if Golden Dawn doesn't take power, they could just bring back the same clowns that were in a year ago before the recent elections. And then
most of the police in Athens are if not members of Golden Dawn, sympathizers with Golden Dawn. And Golden Dawn's main thing is blaming the immigrants for the economic problems in Greece, which I think is just stupid because it's fellow Europeans who are forcing them to do austerity. It's not the immigrants that are coming there that they don't even want to stay there, that they just want to get a status so that they can go on to Germany, actually, so they can work, because Germany's where the jobs are.
Yeah. And I know they blame a lot of the North African refugees, or that come out of because of the the EU supporting the NATO intervention, and because of the NATO intervention, a lot of Libyan refugees have went to countries like Greece or Italy. They go across the Mediterranean, and it's not the immigrants, it's the EU, it's the usury, the bankers, and they won't point that out. That's caused the problems in Greece right now. And the Greek people need to be wary, though, that that a Cyprus scenario could happen, and that it could just that this could be used to eventually cause a regime change sneakily, like they did in regime change sneakily like they did in Cyprus, where they just get the people to turn against because they make such a bad scenario economically that they turn against the government because they blame them for the economic problems. And then Cyprus was the only, I would say that it was the only technically communist regime in Europe at the time. Some people could say that in a way, the Belarusian president Lukashenko, in a way, is somewhat communist because he runs his country, in a Soviet model. It's the last Soviet republic in a way to exist, but he's not communist economically.
In Minsk and Belarus, that's where they made the peace agreement with Putin and with Poroshenko, which the Western Ukrainians are not implementing. But I have a lot of respect for the government in Belarus. You have other governments like Czech Republic, Armenia, that are still pro-Russian within the Caucasus, within Eastern Europe. So what I don't understand is why the Poles supportive of the Western Ukrainians. I mean, look at the history here. These are the grandkids of people like Stefan Bandera, who rounded up all the Poles in Western Ukraine and said, "Don't leave, we won't hurt you." And then when they stayed, massacred them alongside the Jews. So you have Zionists that are supporting the West Ukrainian fascists. You have Poles that are supporting these, betraying their own ancestors against the grandkids of the very people that did that, who have the same ideology.
I was just getting a charger there first. Sorry about that, but it's like literally that Stefan Bandera was a Nazi collaborator that sent Jews to their deaths by sending them to the concentration camp.
And Poland.
Of course, the history of that in Poland. Why are they supporting the West Ukrainians? Why are they supporting the United States funding these West Ukrainians?
But it's not just in Poland, Chris. I'm saying that the Polish minority living in Western Ukraine were rounded up and massacred by Bandera. It wasn't just the Jews. So these same Poles are coming into Western Ukraine today and supporting these people that are not only the direct descendants of those Nazi collaborators, but are of the same ideology and are revising history and making statues of Stefan Bandera and bringing down statues of great revolutionaries like Lenin. It's just despicable.
Yeah, they're destroying the good Russian history, the history that had under the Soviet Union, and they're destroying the history of the triumph over Nazism and Poland, but replacing it with the people that killed a bunch of Poles during World War II by putting by supporting these people that think not only does they think Stefan Bandera is a national hero in Ukraine, is that it's like I think there's no more blatant Nazis in Ukraine than the Azov battalion. If anybody doesn't know who they are, these are the people that openly there's a picture of the Azov battalion, I think, where they have the NATO flag, and they have side by side with the Nazi flag. They're hoisting these two flags, and in one picture they're holding a picture of Adolf Hitler, the Azov battalion. I mean, these are open Nazi supporters, open admirers of Hitler, and these people are just one of the many groups like Reich Sector or the Svoboda Party that's in charge now. That parts of the West Ukrainian regime that's going after and persecuting Russians in East Ukraine, and the East Ukrainian, and then they West Ukraine designates these people in East Ukraine as terrorists. They're just trying to get independence for East Ukraine, and so they could split off, and then it'll be, I think eventually the goal should be to overthrow the government in Kiev altogether and to make a new socialist Ukraine. However, that's a long stretch, and I think they should just go for going for full independence of East Ukraine down the road, and I think that's possible, but it will need more volunteers, more international brigades. I feel like there is some international support, but there needs to be more. There needs to be like the Spanish Civil War was. There's only one American volunteer that's confirmed to be a part of the East Ukrainian battalions against the West Ukrainian fascists.
I want to say something real quick. Our last show, one of the things that Bastard was calling in, defaming Immortal Technique, he said about him that he's a cokehead. I think that's a racist statement. I think just because he's proving American, where some of cocaine's made or where the coca leaves come from, doesn't mean that he's a cokehead. And as a matter of fact, when I met Immortal Technique, he was at a bar partying, and I would have been able to tell if he was coked up, and he was not coked up, and he wasn't that drunk, and he was a gentleman. And I just want to put out there as well the visit of the Pope to Latin America. I mean, I think it was a historic visit. Whatever your differences with the Pope, I think he's making progress in helping to unite Latin America. Ironically, right, the church used to be, especially in Europe, the counterforce to the revolutionaries. But now, Latin America, where liberation theology came from, it actually came from Peru. You have this Jesuit Pope who's very much of the liberation theology thinking on a lot of issues, who's coming to these countries, Bolivia, Paraguay, Ecuador. He'll soon be in the U.S. And I think that there's now a unity in Latin America between Christians of liberation theology and socialists. I think it's an example for all of us.
However, I do have to say is that if Pope Francis is a part of liberation theology, why didn't he accept the crucifix that Morales gave him?
He did.
Or he said it was a disgraceful gift or something like that.
I
Shortly
never
after.
saw that quote. He did accept it. There was a hammer and sickle, and actually Larry Holmes in the video I mentioned earlier talks about this. He's saying, why do the Catholics, take credit for being anti-capitalist? We should as well. But even Larry Holmes, being a full-fledged Trotskyist, probably an atheist, said that was a good thing, that the Pope accepted that gift of the hammer and sickle from Morales with Jesus on it. And that really shows the unity between the two. I'm not aware that later he didn't accept the gift, but the point is there's a unity now, right? I mean, Chavez himself considered himself a Christian. So if you look at the revolutionary acts that Jesus had done, right, like kicking the moneylenders out of the temple and going after corruption in Rome, Jesus was a spiritual leader, but in some ways, political activist as well.
Yeah, but it's like, he did. But I know he definitely did say that he was definitely perplexed why Morales would give him such a gift. He did, as he definitely said that, and I think
maybe he doesn't understand Bolivian humor. I think that the gift was humorous, but it also represented unity.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Pope did not even like the gift that much. In fact, he said he's confused why he even got such a gift. I know he did say that afterwards.
I didn't see that quote. He might have said that after Larry Holmes spoke.
He did say that he might have accepted it just because he didn't want to make a scene by not accepting a gift from a head of state. But I don't think that he definitely did not like the gift later, as he stated.
I'm Googling right now this quote that you're saying because I haven't found that anywhere, but I'm Googling it as you speak.
But yeah, so I don't think Pope Francis is actually by any means I don't think you could call me to the left of the last Pope, but the last Pope was, I'm pretty sure was supportive of,
there's no other Pope that's progressive.
I'm thinking John Paul II was supportive of Bush. So it's like
no other Pope that's progressive.
But Pope Francis might be to the left of him, but he's not liberation theology by any means.
I'll tell you this, and the Jesuits have always been, but at least since that word came into play. But there are exceptions among the Jesuits. But I think that it's indisputable that he's the most progressive Pope there's ever been, really, because no Pope's taken on corruption the way he did. No Pope set up commissions to go after pedophiles among the church. I mean, he's literally taken mansions that belong to archbishops and not only kicked the archbishops out, but they gave the mansions to the poor. And he dresses as a common priest, leaves the Vatican in secret and goes and talks to the poor of Rome and sees about their condition. I mean, there's no other Pope that's done things like that. So, of course, he's to the left of the other two popes. He's to the left of any Pope that's ever been in there that I'm aware of. But I'm trying to look up that quote, so.
Well, he said that he was. I mean, even if he, to say that, I don't know if he was saying that as like he's confused, like he literally doesn't know the reason. But let's say that he's not. I don't think he's truthfully.
Okay, right here, Morales' crucifix gift to Pope causes stir, but it's a BBC article. But I don't know if there's an actual quote from Pope in it. But keep talking. I'll be looking it up.
Well, it's him accepting the gift doesn't. I don't really see that as a big deal because I don't think that. I don't know if I don't know what the Pope actually. I mean, at the moment they might be like, yeah, they're going to take the gift, but they're not going to. It's not like they're going to swat that thing out of his hands or something like that because he's pissed off. I mean, he is the Pope. He has to show extraordinary amount of respect.
It says that the stir was caused among Catholic commentators. I don't see a quote from the Pope himself yet, but I'll keep looking.
I'll give you the link. I know the website, but I forgot I don't know the website name, but I could just do a Google search and find it for you, and I'll just after the show.
Okay.
It's like, anyways, we only have a few minutes, and it's like around this time last time we had our infamous caller came in. I don't know if somebody might call in at the last few minutes now. I don't know why that happens because it seemed like that's happened a few times where people wait till the absolute last minute of the show to call in. And I kind of got at Blog Talk Radio because it could go into studio hour, but here it's kind of pointless if you call in the last 10 minutes because we can't even, if you want to debate, we can't get a good debate started. And if you want to start a good conversation, it's practically needing a show anyways. It's like, why didn't you call it 10:20, or when it was still the 9 o'clock hour. It's like I know we actually would prefer people calling at the very first 15 minutes of the show while we're still introducing the topic, but it's like calling the last 15 minutes to a half hour of the show is not as good as calling in the middle of the show where we could get a really good conversation going. Or like one time, remember at Stable Radio we had.
By the way, it says that gift he was given was made by a Jesuit who was killed by a right-wing assassin. So I'm just putting that out there. Yeah.
Wait, what?
The gift given to the Pope was made by a Jesuit in Bolivia who was killed by a right-wing assassin. Just to put that out there.
So yeah, it wasn't just a random gift. It was kind of symbolic. I mean, somebody was martyred. This is the crucifix that was theirs. I guess it was made by him. Morales. It was given that belonged to that the Jesuit from Bolivia.
Allende of Chile always stressed the importance of uniting with the Christians as well. So you've had countless social leaders in Latin America, not so much Che and Fidel, who were more atheists, but others, and Allende himself could have been atheist, but that were for uniting with Christian leaders, and Chavez really culminated that by the end of the 20th century.
However, but there's a difference between being supportive of, Christianity, being supportive of the Vatican as an establishment. It's like I don't think Chavez was ever supportive of the Vatican, even though he was Catholic. I don't think he was ever supportive of the Vatican because he wasn't even around. He died right around when Francis was made the Pope. He wasn't even around. For Francis, and for all he saw was the ex-Nazi Pope Benedict, and then he saw before that the John Paul II that was notoriously right wing and was worked with George Bush, and John Paul II was the opposite of what Francis is now. And
by the way, I just saw something on Greece. Get back on topic real quick. It says, today is the day in 1953 Greece agreed to forgive Germany's debt. And when it's talking about Germany's debt, and I think when it's talking about Germany's debt, it's talking about the war reparations that Germany owed Greece. There was socialists and communists in Greece after World War II, and Italy as well. They were going to take over the governments there, and the United States prevented that. And I believe the new capitalist government, backed by the United States, is the one that forgave the Germans. Because at that time, the United States was taking in a lot of these German Nazis who worked with the CIA. But that was a decision made by the elites, not by the Greek people, who I'm sure wanted to be compensated. And now, all these years later, Germany's demanding that Greece pays them back. So it's really unjust, and I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
It's really ironic. That's what it is. That so literally, to the day, 62 years later now, Greece is being demanded by Germany that to get their money back. The Germany that was put on them on unfair means anyways, and it's not like this is ancient history ago. In fact, this was in Merkel's lifetime.
This is my father's lifetime. It's not too many generations back. 1953, when they finally forgave the debt, and Greece being too soft on Germany, all these years later, it's coming to backfire, and something's going to be done about that.
This wasn't that long ago, yeah. That's what I'm saying, and yeah, the reason why Greece forgave that debt is because because it was the pro-United States government that was in Greece at the time, and Greece actually almost became a communist country right after War II, but they really pressured for Greece to become, the United States made sure that it would become one of their governments. And the CIA, many analysts were former Nazis, and the freaking chiefs of staff of the United States, or not of the United States, but of NATO, Adolf Husinger in the 1960s, had the same exact position in Nazi Germany. He was one of the top Nazis in Nazi Germany. So it's he was probably the highest. Actually, I don't know about that. Because it it probably is. Because one of the most highest-ranked Nazis who've been open, that we have proof was working with the United States government. There's other pretty high-ranking ones like Carl Barbie.
The Vatican was also complicit at that time in helping Nazis escape to Latin America. And the Vatican was neutral throughout World War II, but of course there was a lot of priests that were Nazi or fascist sympathizers as well. And Mussolini was anti-mob. That's another thing a lot of people don't know. Lucky Luciano, who was head of the mob in the United States, was imprisoned at that time. In exchange for helping Sicily be liberated, he was released from prison and sent back to Italy. So the mob, which was suppressed by Mussolini, worked with the U.S. government. And later, the mob worked with the U.S. government in Cuba to back the fascist Batista. So I just find that a lot of contradictions and ironies and complexities that you have to know from research, from studying, from doing your homework. So as you said earlier, don't start forming your position without knowing the history first.
Yeah, we got only about 4 minutes left of the show until we go to the bumper, and then, so, to wrap this up,
We had no callers, but at least you have a crazy caller, right?
I mean, I think this is better than last show, actually. Having no callers, and the fact that the fact that we didn't have a repeat of what happened last week. I think that we pwned that guy. I mean, that guy is he's probably in hiding now.
They were part of the CIA. It's ridiculous. He doesn't know that the fist represents anti-fascism, Bolshevism, black power. It represents a lot of things, the fist. Since when does Soros have a monopoly on the fist? Because a few years ago, they used the fist to support some fascists in Ukraine. We're the very people that we're against. The guy couldn't even form an opinion about what's happening on Ukraine. He doesn't even know basic geography.
Well, you know what he was insinuating there?
They give the conspiracy crowd a bad name. We're conspiracy realists, not theorists. We're conspiracy analysts as well, and we're going to stress that in our next show the differences with that, with people, the InfoWars, and that come out like this bastard who called in Dave Rivera, who I doubt's a real Latino.
Did you say Latino or Latina? I mean, he might be. Yeah, he's an emotional Latin woman. That's what he is.
Hey, you know what the feminists calling in, right?
I don't. The feminists. You know what? It's like I'll put on my Italian attitude. I can put it down. I'll tell them dumb broads to get the fuck out of here. That's what I'll tell them.
Yeah, next time we're going to have an Italian mobster call us, right? He's like, no, I'm a pro-fascist. What are you talking about? I'm a pro-corporatist guy.
Next week's we're gonna do that show, and we're gonna go hard on InfoWars. I mean, this is gonna be like a 15-round fight on InfoWars, and they're gonna be knocked out. InfoWars, yeah, it's InfoWars.com. They have, another in InfoWars.com, and then a single InfoWhore is a person that all they do is that they're supposedly out there for the truth and spreading the truth, but all they be out there spreading the truth, but all they do is share InfoWars links all day.
No, they even say socialism is equivalent to fascism because Hitler happened to call it National Socialism. Give me a break.
He doesn't even know basic history. That's part of the problem with Alex Jones. And not only that is that he doesn't even talk about fascism really. I don't think he's ever said the word fascist. He says Nazis, and he insinuates the Nazis are socialists.
I don't think he knows what fascist is.
No, he doesn't know that the Nazis are fascist. I don't think he knows that's a thing. He calls. I love him to say he's like Mussolini, that's socialist, and then it's like, sir, Alex Jones, that he was a fascist. What? What's a fascist?
It's don't worry about it.
Yeah, the InfoWars producer team, they're just like, don't worry about it. But
yeah, the producer teams are in the bunker in the video. You know what I'm talking about. People can find on YouTube when they look for Voices of Rebellion, and they won't just pop up Dave Rivera's video, which is completely ridiculous.
That'll be us disgracing InfoWars. That's a funny video.
One and no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple. Al-Aqsa, the name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent and be purposely put in charge of the country. Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never